Hi, everyone. I'm Dr. Jen Schwanke, and I will be hosting a summer masterclass to be held on June 3rd at 11 a.m. that focuses on managing school conflict. If you are tired of school conflict throwing you off track, or if you wish you could turn those tense moments into opportunities for growth, you'll want to join our high impact virtual session. It's designed for principals, aspiring leaders, and teacher leaders. So get ready to ditch the avoidance and embrace conflict head on through a deep dive into understanding types of conflict, mastering the anticipate, analyze, act cycle, tackling common school conflicts, empowering others, and even confronting your own role in conflict. This session will be a dynamic, interactive experience providing practical tips you can use today. So transform your school culture and become a conflict resolution powerhouse. Register at williamdparker.com/guide. And I hope to see you all there. Thank you. Welcome back, Principal Matters podcast listeners. We have a great show for you today. TJ Vari will be talking with my friend Will Parker. Hi, Will. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Jen. It's great to see you.
You too. You too. We have a great question for our opening Q&A session today. And listeners, the question of the week is supported by Summer Pops Math Workbooks. Principals, when students practice math over the summer, math scores go up. What's your summer math plan this year? A great way to start is by ordering free summer workbook samples at summerpopsworkbooks.com. Well, they should ask for your friend Pete. Am I correct?
That's right. Pete's ready
Okay.
to talk
He's
to you,
ready.
and those free samples are so fun to look through.
Excellent. Okay, so we have a question that we're going to start with before we get to TJ Vari. And the question is this: how can we build stronger partnerships with community organizations? This is such a great question because not long ago we talked about building those partnerships with parents, and now we're talking about community organizations. So, great question. This is pops up with a lot of our principals. They want those strong relationships with community organizations, but they're not quite sure how to get them. So, what are you thinking?
Well, I'm thinking, first of all, how important it is to know your context, because what might work in Dublin, Ohio or Tulsa, Oklahoma may not be what's going to work with fill in the blank where you live. And so I just think it's so important, Jen, to when you're trying to build strong community relationships, is to first recognize and honor the relationships that existed before you got there. Or maybe you are inheriting leadership in a place that you've been for a while. There are leaders that get to have that opportunity to be a part of that. And again, that still is true. How do you recognize and honor the history of the relationships that were there long before you were? And so that's going to look different from place to place. It may even look different across the grade levels from secondary to elementary. But Jen, and when I think back to the years that I got to spend in communities, if I took a step back and ask, okay, where are the organizations or the relationships happening that are really influencing the community where I'm living? I'll just mention a few things that became important to me. And that was in our community, churches were an important part of the community fabric. Lots of kids were a part of those church relationships. And so sometimes those either those church pastors or youth directors might come by the school and just say, hey, what can we do to help, or what can we do to love on your community? And so we were usually prepared to just invite them like every other person that we would want to be able to give back to our communities. Sometimes that meant participating with them in things like planting gardens or doing some paint work together or doing some kind of community service, looking at opportunities through things like your chamber of commerce, because some communities have really strong chambers. Some communities might have other organizations that are nonprofits that are giving back, like the Masons do a lot of work in our area in that regard. And so just finding out who are those people that have already been pouring into this community already and are going to continue to pour into it, and then how do we partner with them in being a part of those same relationships. I'll give you one quick example from that too, Jen. Was we had a junior, our Chamber of Commerce actually created a junior Chamber of Commerce membership option so that students who were interested in community leadership could join the chamber as students. And so when they had their monthly luncheons, we could take a group of kids with us as school leaders to represent the school, but also to learn about the community. And of course, when they were hosting festivals and events and parades, they'd lean on our student leaders to be a part of that too. So those are just some quick thoughts from Will on just ways that I've seen that have been helpful for me in building community relationships.
One time, this was years ago. I was 2 or 3 years into my first principalship, and I decided I wanted more community engagement. So I invited some prominent business members in, and I gave them a donut or something ridiculous. And we talked, and I talked about wanting to build engagement. And at the end, I'll never forget it. A realtor said to me, she raised her hand very respectfully, and she said, "I have to admit, it just seems like you want money." And she was right. That was what I had wanted, right? I wanted some donations. I wanted a local business to donate food for teachers. I wanted prizes for our springtacular event. They were exactly right, and I walked away feeling a little bit like I'd gotten kicked in the face, but knowing that that was the perception, and that local businesses just felt like the school wanted their money or their product, and so I recalibrated what I wanted. You started with saying you have to be clear on your context. And I think that's similar. You have to really be clear on why. Why do you want this partnership? Why do you want this relationship? And it shouldn't just be about money, because businesses get hit up all the time for donations and money. They're tired of that. So what can you give them in return? And how can the students become part of their success story? So fast forward a few years, and our art teacher developed a really strong partnership with the nearby nursing home, and she took we were able to walk there, so that was a plus, but she took students there and they did art projects with the residents there, and what they got in return was a visit. What we got was far more. And there wasn't a single dollar that changed hands, not a single sandwich. It was more authentic and real in terms of the learning that came out of it.
Wow, Jen, I love that. And it's just such a great reminder. So, Principal Matters listeners, I know our Q&As are just quick responses to these questions, but I think you could unpack this question in so many different ways. And so just take a look at your community. And Jen, thank you for that reminder, and ask, what are the relationships that we can build together that are going to make this community stronger? Not what can I get out of it, or not
Right.
what's the money value connected to it, but what's the real value? What's the value that we can create together to make this a more meaningful, valuable, loving place to live? And you know what happens when you build good relationships like that, Jen? People want to help.
Yeah, that's correct.
They want to help. All right, Principal Matters listeners. Well, as you step into this week's conversation with our guest, TJ Vari, before we do that, Jen, I just want to remind listeners, if you are interested in summer PD, Jen Schwanke is offering to Principal Matters listeners a great PD June 3rd called A Principal's Guide to Conflict Management. And Jen, what can they expect if they jump into that learning?
Yeah, I hope we get a lot of folks joining us. It's kind of an experiment that you and I are doing.
Mhm.
We're hoping to launch a series for with a lot of your friends and associates, Will. But this is kind of our first crack at a 3-hour masterclass on how you can mediate conflict in your schools. And so the thinking is conflict's not going away, so we can let it keep us up at night, or we can get better at identifying it, anticipating it, analyzing, and then figuring out how best to act.
Well, if you want to save a seat, go to williamdparker.com/guide, GUIDE, and sign up today, because we are so excited and we look forward to seeing you there. Well,
And
Jen, thank
and
you
Will, let's
once
also
again. Yeah.
so I'm sorry, let's also say it says 3-hour masterclass. We will take breaks. So don't anybody worry about that. We will take snack breaks.
Yes, and we're going to have fun, because that's
Yeah,
the whole part, the best part of learning. Well, Principal
absolutely.
Matters listeners, thank you for checking in with us at the beginning of this week's show. I know you're going to love this conversation with TJ Vari, but until next time, thanks for doing what matters, and we'll talk to you again soon.
Thanks, everyone.
Hi, friends. I want to tell you about my newest book, Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? An Educator's Guide to Doing What You Love. Whenever I find myself answering the same questions over and over again, it usually means it's time to write down those responses as a resource. And this new book is born from conversations with high achieving educators just like you. Just like you and me, we all run into hard decisions, career choices, navigating complex situations. Where do we turn to determine whether or not we're moving in the right direction? Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? An Educator's Guide to Doing What You Love is a 20-chapter book guiding you through the stories, insights, research, reflections, and applications for your way forward. Pick up your copy today for coaching on your leadership road ahead. You can find Whose Permission Are You Waiting For? An Educator's Guide to Doing What You Love at my website at williamdparker.com/books or wherever you purchase your books. Support for Principal Matters comes from DigiCoach and its walkthrough tool. I want you to picture walking through classrooms, observing teachers and students. In just 10 minutes, you'd hope to see good instructional strategies and student learning taking place, or maybe you have questions about something missing from instruction or planning. Instead of taking 30 minutes to write a follow-up email or leaving your teacher feeling unsupported, wouldn't it be great to have an app on your phone or tablet where you could send immediate feedback while also collecting data? Enter DigiCoach, a customizable walkthrough and coaching tool created by school leaders for school leaders with thousands of pre-written, research-based commendations and coaching tips empowering you to provide quick, actionable feedback. DigiCoach is not an evaluative tool. Instead, it is an easy-to-use feedback and coaching tool, an efficient way to store your notes and collect data for improving student outcomes right in your hands. It can be used on iPhone, Android, or tablets and includes speech-to-text functions. Make the most of your walkthroughs with a tool that saves you time and enhances meaningful feedback to your teachers. Go to digicoach.com to learn more, and please tell them Principal Matters recommended you check them out. That's digicoach.com.
You're listening to Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast.
Principal Matters Podcast, episode 443. Hi, friends. This is Will Parker, host of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast, where each week we bring you inspiring, innovative, and imaginative ideas for your own school leadership. This week, we're going to be talking about why every student deserves a pathway with my special guest and return guest, Dr. T.J. Vari. T.J. Vari is the Senior Director of Product Strategy at Maya Learning and a former Deputy Superintendent, Principal, Assistant Principal, and high school English teacher. His master's degree is in school leadership and his doctorate is in innovation and leadership. He holds several honors and distinctions, including his past appointment as president of the Delaware Association for School Administrators and the Paul Carlson Administrator of the Year Award. He teaches educational leadership courses at the master's and doctoral levels, and he's co-authored 6 books, including his latest 2, The 7 Mind Shifts for School Leaders and Invest in Your Best. He's a national presenter on school leadership and college and career readiness, the co-founder of the Schoolhouse 302, a leadership development institute, and a good friend with whom I get to touch base with often because you're doing some really new, awesome work, TJ Vari. Welcome back to Principal Matters listeners. It's been, I'll have to go back and look at the episode. It's been more than a year since I've had you on the show. But why don't you fill in the gaps of the intro and tell listeners something else they may be surprised to know about you?
Yeah, thanks, Will. It's awesome to be back on the show. You have such a great show. I'm a fan, a listener, and a friend. So that's all fun to be all of those things now. Fill in the gap. Well, 20 years in public education, I thought I was a lifer. But through the leadership development company and some keynotes that we were doing, I met some leaders at Maya Learning who are transforming the way that students interface with college and career readiness and planning. Was consulting with them for a little while, and then here I am at a full-time job in the private sector. Again, I should say, because I was in private sector before public. But it's just awesome to be in this space, and I'm really enjoying myself. So Maya Learning, M-A-I-A Learning, and we can talk a little bit about that too. But college and career readiness, as you know, is a huge passion of mine. I think last time I was on your show, you said surprise people, and I said, well, I sucked at school. Even though I'm a school leader, I stunk at it. So here I am back trying to make it a better space for kids, but internationally now, 74 countries, and just excited.
Well, it was Principal Matters podcast episode 390, which, oh my gosh, TJ, it literally was a year ago from the time this is coming out that we talked. Um, and in that episode, you explain also in the your first round of private sector before you stepped in as a lifer. I'm going to say 20 years makes you a lifer no matter what, educator. You were in restaurant management. You learned so much about how to turn around productivity and profitability of that work in management. So when you stepped into education, one of the things I love about your story is how you consistently applied those lessons to classroom management, school management, campus management, district management. And now you're on this new exciting journey, help back in the private sector, but you're still working with schools. So can you talk a little bit more about what you're doing at Maya Learning? And I know this is not a advertisement for them. This is an opportunity for you and I to talk about why every student deserves a pathway, but tell us a little bit more about the work there. And then I want to talk about some of the work that you do in post-secondary planning.
Yeah, for sure. So My Learning is an all-encompassing platform. It's a software tool, and millions of students are connected to it. We run the entire state of California for college and career planning, but it's the neatest thing ever. In the last 10 years of my career, I've spent building pathways, middle and high school pathways, getting students to have transcripts that were very attractive to colleges and universities, getting first generation students into colleges, and in a lot of cases into colleges at a serious discount or for free. Work-based learning, where we would get kids into an industry partnership and they would sometimes get provisional contracts for, if you get this credential or you get this degree, we'll hire you back into our industry or into our company. That's been my passion for 10 years. Well, then I learned about Maya Learning. They do all of that. They facilitate all of that. They start with interest surveys. They teach kids. It starts, there's now a product that starts in kindergarten where kids are learning about career exploration through games. And so this is where I'm saying this is what changes education for young people. And why is it so important to start in kindergarten? Because, we start this type of thing usually in middle and high schools, but lots of kids are disenfranchised with school by fourth or fifth grade, and it's just too late. So Maya starts with that exploration piece as early as kindergarten, and then kids learn about themselves. There's SEL lessons. There's lessons for counselors and teachers. They do career exploration. They do college exploration. They literally can apply for college in the platform through Parchment or the Common App. And there's this neat thing. I'm on a project with the team called Maya Offers, where colleges and universities can literally go into the platform and offer scholarships and other things to students right there in the platform. I could go on and on about it. This is not a commercial for Maya, but it is the beginning of our conversation about why this is so critical that every single kid have access to something like Maya, including a team of people in their school who care about their college and career planning, and they need to have a plan before they graduate. I'm convinced that if we're not doing that, that's our next step.
Okay, so let's stay there. Quick anecdote. I was just talking to, we have 4 kids. My youngest son, who's 19 and in college, working on a degree that's going to prepare him to potentially be an air traffic controller. And we were talking about a conversation he had with a 5-year-old. And he said he asked the 5-year-old, what do you want to be when you grow up? And he said, I want to be a police. And my son was laughing because that's exactly what he said when he was 5. And he was just, kind of saying what all of us know. When you're a kid, most people ask you that question. You can only think of one or two things. I'm a police, a fireman, if whatever your dad is, or a principal. But so just to bring this full circle, TJ, I love it that we're going to be talking today about why every student deserves a post-secondary plan. But I love it that you are already in the middle of like, okay, but let's start this conversation when they're 5 years old, and let's help them explore all the different options that are available for them out there long before this. So let's sit here for a little bit longer, because I know it's a passion of yours to ensure that every student has a post-secondary plan. And I'm just curious what thoughts you would add to that, but also what models have you observed that are working?
Yeah, sure. No, I mean, it's a critical conversation. I think more educators need to be talking about it. It's also an equity issue, Will, for all of our equity champions out there, because privileged kids are talking about their careers and career development before they start school in kindergarten. And that's a conversation that lots of kids have at home that some kids don't get. And it's one that we need to introduce to them in school. And again, as early as possible through games, through discussions, through exploration. The other thing that's happening across the country is pathway development, and we're doing that work pretty well in middle and high schools where I've seen it happening. I've been on some national panels to talk about pathways. The problem with pathways when they're introduced in middle and high schools is a lot of times kids don't know which pathway is best for them. They haven't done a career inventory survey. They haven't done assessments. They haven't explored careers outside the ones that they know from their moms and their uncles and their dads at home. So that becomes a problem. And so we need to do some work with all kids. And that's why platforms like Maya are really important, because once you introduce that, every kid has access. And if you build that, talking about models, if you build that into the student day, and it should happen in the student day, then we become the experts on helping kids use the platform and not necessarily the experts on all of the colleges and all of the careers available. The educators just aren't going to know that. They're experts in their content area, and they're not going to know the answers to all those questions, which is why a platform is so important. But models, you asked about models. I think, one thing that I'm passionate about, especially in middle and high schools, is advisory periods. We have these things in elementary school, circles, morning time, places where we can do this work and have these conversations. But middle and high school tend to be content driven, period by period, drooling schedules. I mean, it can be rough, 7 periods a day, 7 different bosses. That's something else you and I could probably spend an hour on as well. But I would say the first model is making sure that there's space in the student day for them to do some of this work.
That's so important. And so when it comes to, pathway development and, recognizing, I love how you said that this is an equity conversation, because some students are already receiving these conversations long before they start school. And some students are in settings where these conversations are happening, and others never have the conversations. And so the question for anyone listening would be, whether you're at the elementary level, secondary level, or post-secondary level, how are you intentionally introducing conversations around pathways? And this is kind of where I want to segue this conversation, TJ, because I think I know what you're going to say, but I want to go here anyway, which is the dilemma with every one of the, and this can happen every one of the episodes that I host. Every great idea reminds principals of another valuable tool or principle that they need to be employing, while at the same time reminds them of how much they want to be doing that they're not. And so I want to sit here with you too, because I know you think a lot about these kinds of things. What challenges do you see school leaders facing who want to provide the right tools and implementations for students, but find it really hard to know, like, well, how do I work this in, or how do I prioritize this when I'm already trying to do all these other things? And so we could take that a lot of different directions, but I'm asking it that way on purpose because I just want to sit in that tension for a moment, recognizing that we all know these are things that we need to be doing with students. If we're not, what other ideas should we have in mind about how to set a goal like this, while at the same time recognizing all the other responsibilities that we have?
Yeah, I think it's a really important question, Will. But I do think like the answer to that question is school leadership. I mean, it is what you do. It is your work. It is the work that we do at the Schoolhouse 302. The answer is school leadership, and the answer is building the capacity of school leaders to change things. We can't accept the status quo. The conversation around the country is that we need to be doing what's best for all kids. I believe that wholeheartedly, but the system was never built that way. I mean, let's be candid. The system was just not built for all kids. And it was built to dole out privilege. And it can continue to do that unless a leader shows up and does something different. And by the way, the leader is the one who is willing to do something that might not work. I think, I always tell people I'm more interested in new and different problems than the same ones we've always had. So when you talk about making a change, one of the first things people will say is, do we know that's going to work? Well, I know what we're doing now doesn't. So if I want to do what's best for all kids, I'm willing to have a bias towards making a change versus keeping it the way it is. And so I would first lean on leadership lessons, reading about change, understanding change management, understanding change models, and becoming, an agent of change in schools. If a school, as school leaders, your audience listening, you're the agent for change. Otherwise, the system is going to keep doing what it's always done. What we're talking about now, pathway development, industry partners, work-based learning, getting kids off campus, transporting kids to the local factory, getting kids college credits while they're still in high school, making sure more students, marginalized students, take AP courses, making sure kids that might not have gone to college go to college, at least a 2-year institution. I can talk more about that. That's not going to happen naturally. That's not going to happen naturally. School did what it did for 100 years, and certain segments of the population benefited from it, and others didn't. And if we want everybody to benefit from school, we're going to have to change it.
I'm glad you said it that way. And I'm going to repeat what you said, that so many of the times we inherit systems that have been built to advantage the privileged or those that can figure out the system. Your call first to leaders is to the courage to influence that system and become change agents themselves. So I think you and I both recognize the motivation and the courage necessary. But I think on the flip side of that, you also recognize the importance of understanding the system well enough to create new ones, and also to build teams around the goals that you want to reach as well. So let's stay there a little bit longer, because TJ, you had so much experience as a assistant principal, teacher, assistant principal, district leader, and now coaching leaders. So I want to apply this to leaders that are stepping into the work. They have the courage to do this work, but they're also trying to examine, how do I know I'm making the right decisions in these situations? And you and I have talked a little bit about this off air too, but let's talk about the motivations around just around decision making. What are some of the processes that go through your mind when you're just trying to filter through hard decisions when it comes to changing systems?
Well, the first thing that I'm thinking about when a change needs to occur is somebody's going to have to go first. And so it might as well be me. And I think that's a really important concept, because a lot of people are waiting around in their minds and physically for someone to tell them what to do or tell them what to change. And in the meantime, they're going to continue to do school the way it's always been done, partly because we all went to school and this is the way it is. So we're going to do to the kids what was done to us. And guess what? For a lot of educators, that worked. But for a lot of people in general, it didn't. I mean, our prisons are full. And if you look at the statistics, a lot of people in trouble in our country don't read well or can't read at all. Mm-hmm. And so we know we have a problem. And so the leader needs to go first. And so the decision is, we can't keep doing it the way we've always done it and expect different results. And then we have to ask ourselves, what do kids really need to be successful in life? And I don't think school is all about preparing for work. I don't. But I do think that's part of it. And we've got to quit thinking that the first grade teacher is preparing kids for second grade. All of our responsibilities is to prepare kids for life. And part of life is work. And by the way, our advocates for social and emotional learning should be jumping out of their chairs right now, because career exploration is part of social and emotional learning. You know what people want? You know what kids want? They want to feel valuable and they want to have a purpose. It's what we all want. It's a human thing. And so school can help with that, or it can hurt that. And so there's a lot of aspects of school that make people feel not so good about themselves. Grading being one. Don't get me on that topic, right? But school needs to be a place where we find our purpose, and we do that through exploration. And the leader's job is to make sure that that's happening. And you can only do that by changing the current model. And you can only do that by going first.
Let's take a moment to thank our sponsors, and then we'll be right back. Why is iExcel used in 95 of the top 100 U.S. school districts? Because it works. Research across 45 states showed that iExcel schools outperform other schools on state tests. With iExcel, you get a personalized online learning and teaching solution that helps you improve achievement, empower teachers, track progress, and more. This one platform for K-12 helps teachers accomplish what normally would require dozens of other tools. For example, as students practice skills, iExcel automatically adapts to ensure each learner is always supported and challenged at the right level. iExcel also provides every student with a personalized learning plan to help them close knowledge gaps effectively. One of my favorite things about iExcel is their personalized test prep tool. For exams like the SAT and ACT, iExcel will analyze a student's most recent score and generate a custom list of skills to help them boost their scores. If you want to take the load off of your teachers so they can do their best work, iExcel can help. Learn more at iexcel.com/PM today. Principals know a strong school starts with a strong team, making sure teachers feel heard, supported, and valued. But in a busy school year, it's easy to miss how your staff is really doing. That's why I'm excited about Alpaca, a new way for school leaders to listen to their teachers and support them well. It all starts with one simple question: how are you doing? And how easy is that? Alpaca's quick pulse surveys give teachers a way to share honest feedback, no long forms or 1 to 5 scales, just meaningful insights that help you know where to celebrate and where to focus. And celebration, Alpaca makes it easy. Each month, Alpaca delivers a teacher celebration kit with care packages, recognition ideas, and fun activities. It's effortless for principals and ensures teachers feel heard and celebrated. With Alpaca, your teachers will feel heard and you will feel like a stronger leader. Make a real difference in your school's culture at alpacapacks.com/Principal Matters and get 15% off just for Principal Matters listeners. That's alpacapacks.com/Principal Matters. I love that. So let me play the part of the leader who's listening to this conversation. And they're like, amen, TJ. I believe that. I see that. I recognize that. How do I influence a system that's so much bigger than me? If I'm in a place where I want to be that change agent, where do I begin? Especially if I'm in a place where it seems like, oh, I feel very lonely in wanting to re-examine and then reorganize a system that I know has been this way for decades and decades?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question, Will. You always ask the best questions to get people thinking, and you want strategy, right? You're saying, look, what's the strategy? I think the first thing is credibility, and every leader who's listening right now has a domain. I don't care if you think you don't have influence over, you're not the principal, you're an assistant principal, you're a new leader, you're a department chair, you're a teacher leader, whoever's listening out there, you're the coordinator at the district level, and you don't oversee the assistant principals and you don't oversee the teachers. So therefore you feel like you don't have influence and to tell people what to do. That's all baloney, right? Everybody has influence over their domain. And by domain, I mean the department or the one person or the folks who are listening. And that domain needs to be sparkling and clean. And it needs to be better than the other domains. If I was an assistant principal in a high school, just to give you an example, and I oversaw the ELA and social studies department, and all my other peers oversaw other departments, I would want my ELA and social studies department to be the best teachers in the school and the happiest teachers in the school. And by the way, those two things can happen. And then when people came by my domain, they would see that it was just better than what everybody else was doing. And when you have that kind of credibility and that clout, you can tweak a little thing here and a little thing there, and nobody's going to get upset with you. And you change a little thing, and then you change. I'm calling for massive change, Will, but we know that massive change doesn't happen overnight. Massive change happens through incremental changes.
Mm-hmm.
And so the job of the leader is to make incremental improvements every day that lead to massive changes over the course of a school year.
I love that. Now, you know how much I love to brainstorm with you too, TJ. So I'm going to throw some other thoughts in too. But first, I just want to affirm some of the things that you said, which is that if you want to be a change agent, you begin where you are, begin where you're planted, and make the biggest difference that you can with the things that are in front of you and your responsibilities, which build the credibility, then therefore for people to trust you to do that work at a larger scale. When you have the opportunity to influence something that's larger than you are, maybe something that's new or something you've not done before, you have to recognize that and know that there's always things you don't know, which means that you're a learner too, but inviting others into those conversations and exploring those options with others gives you an opportunity to invite people into that example. I'll give you a quick anecdotal example from back when I was a high school assistant principal. We recognized a high percentage of our incoming eighth graders who were struggling first year high school. And this was a chronic problem with kids that had been advanced out of middle school without having been successful in middle school. And everybody's been there when in schools where you graduate the kids because they're getting too big or too old, and the next school gets them and they're like, okay, now what do we do? So we started studying the data, and we started recognizing that any students who had struggled in 2 or 3, they had struggled to be successful in usually 3 or more courses before we got them. We're going to continue to struggle academically when we got them. Or if they had behavioral issues, they were going to continue to struggle with us. And this wasn't a way to label kids. It was just a way for us to step back and look at the data of why do we have so many kids struggling to succeed in 9th grade. So probably one of the most important things that I did was I pulled that data. I reached out to our staff. This was during the summer. And I said, I want to have a conversation about stronger interventions for our most struggling incoming 9th graders. And I don't want to do it alone. And so I just opened up, volunteer if you want to come for lunch on this date, I'll buy lunch from a Mexican restaurant and we'll just have this conversation. And I had a dozen teachers show up. And from that dozen teachers, we spent the day just studying the data, looking at the trends, coming up with some suggestions and ideas. And we began to conceive of some potential interventions and mentor relationships and older student and younger student. So we ended up developing an entirely new program stepping into the coming year that began to significantly decrease the number of failures and increase the number of successes with kids. And I'm just giving that as an anecdote, TJ, because in all of the conversations that we're having, when you see a need of an area, don't try to answer it by yourself. And when you ask for input from other people who are hungry for change, then you have to step in it together. But usually it takes a leader to invite that conversation, but then it usually takes collaboration to figure out what you're going to be doing next. And then the last thing I would add, I was writing this down as you were talking, this is one of my favorite phrases, is whose permission are you waiting for? If you see something that needs to happen, somebody's got to step in and start making it happen. Because otherwise we just keep, like you said, repeating the same cycles over and over and over again.
Will, what you're talking about is creating a movement. And one of my favorite, clips, Derek Sivers' video, the leadership lessons of a shirtless dancing guy. And you gotta, don't Google shirtless dancing guy, Google leadership lessons from a shirtless dancing guy, especially if you're on a school computer. And what you'll find is that movement starts with one person. And by the way, if you study that video, the one person was ridiculed for quite some time. But I think to underscore what you're saying is that you don't have to be like, I used to think that I had to be the shirtless dancing guy to start the movement. You don't. You need someone to dance. And so if you're the leader, to the point you were making, sending out the email and saying, I'm looking at this right now and I don't like it. And I bet you'll find some other people who don't like it either.
Mm.
Who-
So I'm watching our time, TJ, because I want to respect your time. And I also I want to transition here a little bit. And before I do, I just want to say, first of all, kudos that you're committing so much of your time now towards taking this concept of pathways, especially pathways for students post-secondary, and expanding it way beyond just the district that you live in now. I mean, you're doing this all over the nation. So I want listeners to connect with you on that work. But you've also, man, you've spent years writing content for leaders about mindsets, about investing in their best. I mean, you've co-authored so many books. So I want to ask for your input on this question, because I like to ask this question of my guests, which is, my listeners are both new and aspiring and veteran, but a lot of times I'll have newer leaders reach out to me that are listening, because this is a place for them to start these conversations. So if you could give that feedback or advice to that person stepping into a new season in leadership, or thinking about stepping into school leadership, what are some things you would encourage them to hold on to? Some principles that you would advise them to think about?
Well, I'm going to get really granular here, Will, because I think the people who you're talking about, they need strategies and they need tactics and they need tools and they need them right now. So the first, I'm going to give two strategies and that go together. And I just wrote about this. The first is time blocking. Every new leader and every great leader has a vision for what their day should look like. And what happens if you let the system beat you down, when I say new and great, because sometimes we get into 3 and 4 years, we're not great yet because the vision that we have for our day is not coming true. And if you're a school leader right now, you can drive to work with nothing on your calendar and be busy all day.
Mm-hmm.
And so the first strategy is time blocking. The only way to make true what that vision that you have for your day is to time block on your calendar. I'm going to use this time for this specific thing. And I mean, not just the teacher observation. I'm talking about, I'm going to greet every student this morning. That needs to be on the calendar. When does that happen? Because if that's not blocked, something's going to happen and you're not going to greet every student. Okay. So the second strategy goes with the first strategy, which is time blocking. You've got to block the day. You've got to block the whole week. This is what I'm intending to do in this block. I'm a realist, though. I know that sometimes what we intend to do in that block doesn't actually happen in that block. So the second strategy is reverse time blocking. You then need to go back into the calendar, take out what was going to be there, and put in what actually happened. That way, at the end of the day and the end of the week, you can reflect. And I bet you the things that are derailing you are themes. They're happening over and over again. It's the same people or it's the same problems that are derailing your day. So I don't care if you're pushing a trash can around in the cafeteria, it needs to be on your calendar. And I don't care if somebody stops you in the hall and says, we need you on the 3rd floor, and you're on your way to do a walkthrough or a teacher observation. You don't get to go do that. By the way, those should be sacred times, but sometimes an emergency happens. That emergency needs to then go on the calendar as a reverse time block so that you can reflect. And the final thing I'll say about it, Will, and why it's so important, the neuroscientists and behavioral psychologists are clear about this. We are not good at reflection. We just don't do a good job. It's really hard to think about what you're doing while you're trying to do it. And so the tool of time blocking and reverse time blocking at the end of the day and the end of the week is to help you to reflect and to help you to improve how you're using your time. You only get so much time in the school day, in the school week, in the school year, and we need to maximize our impact in that time. And boy, could I talk for another half an hour about just that in terms of instructional leadership and the way that our time unfolds in a school. But if you're a new leader, an aspiring leader, or one leader out there who wants to be great, you've got a time block and reverse time block.
You're so right. And I'll give just a quick example of that. 2 things you just said, which is time blocking. But I love that you also said reverse time blocking, because you're actually asking people to reflect on 2 things, which is, what are the things that I want to be doing that are my biggest priorities and exercise my strongest strengths. And then the reverse of that is, what are the things that I'm actually doing that I would like to not be doing so that I can get time to do the things that are my strength areas? And what we tend to do is the first, but not the second. And there's this little practice. I was trying to find this while you were saying this, and I can't find it quickly enough to do it succinctly. So I'll have to look it up and put it in the show notes later. But I came across a practice a couple of years ago called the happiness box. And I wish I could just reference the person who I heard this from, but it was on another podcast. So, but I found the practice, and it's just 4 quadrants and little questions. And one of them is the question of, what are the things I want to be doing the most? And then another question would be, what are the things I'm doing that I wish I wasn't doing? And then one of the question is, what are the things I'm no longer doing and I'm glad I'm not? And I can't remember the fourth one off the top of my head, but I remember walking through that practice as a self-reflection model. And I just kept coming up against some of the same things over and over again, because I would do this every few months and I would be like, I keep writing the same things down. And I finally had to stop and tell myself, okay, if I keep saying that these are the things I'm doing that that I really don't want to be spending my time doing, what am I doing to change my system to stop that from happening all the time? What interventions am I employing that could make this a different outcome? And I'll give you an example, like in my work, I was recognizing, even in this creation of this podcast and the content I create, the consulting I do, I was still spending a lot of my time editing my podcast, proofing my newsletters, getting things up on my website and all those things. And I realized because of that, I wasn't being able to do some of the other things I wanted to do: create training, consult and coach, spend time with leaders. And so for me, one of the solutions, and I know this is Will Tell and Will's story, but I'm just making an application, was, okay, then I'm going to have to either train someone else to do some of these other things for me, or I'm never going to have the space to do those other things I want to do. So kudos to Emily, who is listening into this conversation, taking notes as we speak, because I trained her, my executive assistant, to at the time part-time, but now she works for Principal Matters full-time, trained her to do those processes for me. It took a while, but once she had learned to do those things, I could do the front end, hand her the back end, and then suddenly an entire day of my week literally opened up for me to be able to do some things that I wasn't being able to do before. So I'm just giving that as a quick personal example, TJ, of what you're saying to leaders. The problem is that most of us never get to the reflection piece so that we can actually make those changes that we need to make. And I know you think deeply about your own practices too. So anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think that it's true. There's more to the story, right? The part of the story about what you're saying is, we then need to look at the calendar and ask ourselves some questions. Should I have been the person to do these things? Which people are taking up too much of my time? Which practices do I have? You stood up and told everybody you have an open door policy. So now people are coming in and out and you don't have time to get any of your work done. So there's practices that we have that we think are good things to do, and they may be nice altruistic things to do, but they're not effective. They could even be efficient. They're happening all the time, and I'm taking care of it every time it happens. But is that the vision that you have for school improvement? And so you've got to have that tool, and you've got to have the space. And so there's a lot to go. I coach a lot of assistant principals. In fact, every assistant principal in Delaware comes through, new assistant principals come through a program that Joe and I do through a university and the Department of Education. And the first thing I say to them is, let me see your calendar. And a lot of times they have these full open blocks of time that's not scheduled. I'm like, what did you do during that time? And they're like, I don't remember, but it was hard and I was busy. Well, we're never going to be able to change that unless we reflect. And by the way, for me, it was either before I got up from my desk at the end of the day or before I got out of my car at the end of the week. And you just study it. You study in yourself.
So I want to wrap up this conversation with 2 things. One, I want listeners to know how they can stay connected with you, TJ, and any parting words of advice that you have, but also tell them a little bit about your work with Joe, because you guys have done a lot of work together over the years too. But also, I know you're doing a lot of work independently now that you're doing this work. And then I do have to say, I in my notes I found the creator of the happiness box, Sam Horn. So I'll put a link in the show notes because I was driving me crazy. But how can listeners stay connected with you, TJ, and in your resources and any parting words of advice for leaders as they think about creating pathways for their students?
Yeah, so a couple of things. One, last time I was on your show, I gave out my telephone number, and I'm going to do it again, 608-347-6954. Please call me. You can also email me at Maya Learning, M-A-I-A Learning. I'm sorry, TJ Vari at Maya Learning. So that's TJVARI at Maya Learning, M-A-I-A Learning.com. You can email me. We can set up a time. I linked up with a guy today who DM'd me in LinkedIn. And by the way, when I gave my phone number out at your the last time I was on your show, people called me. School leaders called. And one guy even said, you know what? I like that so much, I'm going to buy that book. And then he did a book study with his team. So go to our site, theschoolhouse302.com, theschoolhouse302.com. Check out our books, check out our resources. We do a podcast called Focus Ed. It's in its 6th season, Will. And you know that. And it's a little tidbit, 30 minutes. I just started another podcast called College and Career Readiness Radio Show. College and Career Readiness Radio. And so you can find that. And so those are the places where you can connect with me. And I do want to talk to school leaders about college and career readiness and leadership. Those are my 2 big passions. And one being, and I should have said this earlier, Will, when you asked the question, we are so focused on getting kids across that stage. And we need to figure out how we can focus on them being successful when their feet hit the ground. And I want us to think about that it's not just the next grade. I know I mentioned the next grade, but it's not just graduation. It has to be readiness for the world and for knowing ourselves to be ready for the world.
All right, Principal Matters listeners, if you want to text or call TJ, we'll put his number in the show notes at 608-347-6954. And it makes me so excited to know leaders reached out to you. And likewise, last time you and I were talking, we were recognizing that I'm coaching someone right now that you referenced to me. So I love this relationship, TJ. Thank you for the work that you're doing with leaders that I get to do with leaders. And I love how what that old saying that a tide raises all ships. And so it's so fun to just raise the ships with one another in leadership. And then kudos on your great work that you've done with Dr. Joseph Jones in your podcasting, but also on the work that you're doing now independently and with your books and your new podcast. So we'll put that in the show notes too. But thank you for your wisdom and for the fun collaboration. So I'll say this as we wrap up to Principal Matters listeners. One of the joys I have in doing this work is off the air conversations, and you and I have met pretty regularly this past year and just get in the room and we do what we're recording right now. We push and we ask really hard questions. And so Principal Matters listeners, if that's something that sounds valuable to you, whether that's in a one-on-one setting or in a mastermind setting, TJ and I both do that with various leaders in various settings. So reach out to either one of us, because my goal is always to point people to the place where they're going to feel the most comfortable and most challenged, and with people that they trust. And I can tell you, TJ Vari is one of those leaders. So TJ, thank you so much for the leadership you're providing. And Principal Matters listeners, thank you for your passion in serving others, because what you do matters. We'll see you again next week. Thank you for listening to today's episode of Principal Matters, the School Leaders Podcast. If you enjoyed the show, would you take a moment and like, share, subscribe, or leave us a review? In fact, if you share it out with a friend, even more people can become a part of these conversations. Sign up for our newsletter at williamdparker.com for even more free resources. And don't forget to check out our website to learn more about our books, professional development offerings, Grow Academies, masterminds, executive coaching, and keynote presentations. Wow, let's keep learning together. And thank you for doing what matters.
Principal Matters